Hey, welcome to Plan Patterns. Today's video is a sew-along of the Freja dress. So the Freja dress is a completely free pattern. If you sign up to my newsletter, you will get this pattern for free. It's a PDF pattern and it's available in sizes 32 to 54 EU sizes. I will leave the link to the pattern in the description box below so you can download it right away. This is actually the first pattern I ever designed for Plan Patterns, and it's a very simple pattern to make. So I wanted to make something without zippers, no buttons, no elastic. You only need your fabric and your thread. So it's very simple. It's a kind of straight A-line dress with tie details at the waist, a little opening, a slit at the front. It's sleeveless, the body is fully lined, and yeah, it's like knee length, great in the summer in warm weather, but you can also put a turtleneck underneath for the colder months. And since this pattern is a free pattern, it has been quite popular, so many people have already made it. But if you're new here and you would like a free pattern, you can follow along this sew-along and I will show you exactly how to make it. So when you have your pattern, you're going to print it out on your printer at home, stick and tape it together, and you're ready to go. So you can choose the size that is closest to your bust and also look at the hip measurement, the seat measurement. And if you are between sizes, you can always grade out to the size or grade into the size that it's closest. But the bust or the hip size is a good starting point. So the fabric I'm using today is a cotton lawn from Stars London, and this fabric was gifted to me. And it's this gorgeous turquoise fabric, and I'm using white fabric for the lining, just so you guys can see which part is which, because if I cut everything out of the turquoise fabric, I don't think it would be so easy to tell. So for the purpose of this sew-along, I'm using white for all of the pieces that are inside and the turquoise fabric for all of the outer pieces. So I hope that will make it more clear. I just ironed all of my fabric before I got started cutting, because it had been folded for a long time. It was kind of wrinkly. So you want your fabric to lay pretty smooth and lay flat on your cutting board before you start. We're gonna start by cutting out all of the pattern pieces. This pattern doesn't have seam allowance added to it. So you're gonna choose the seam allowance you want to use. I always use 1 centimeter for woven fabrics, so that's what I'm gonna do in this video. I didn't have enough length of fabric left for the belt, so instead of cutting 2 of these on fold, I cut 4. So I'm going to put them together so they become this long. So I'm just gonna sew them together here and sew these 2 together, so I have 2 long belts. And for the hem, you can, the pattern suggests 5 centimeters, because in the pattern illustration and in the sample I made, there are some top stitching details, and it looks really nice with 5 centimeters, but today I went for 2 centimeters because I am doing a double fold at the hem. And then you're gonna mark your darts. So I always put a pin at the dart pivot point to mark where the dart ends, and I cut a few millimeters into the seam allowance where the dart legs start. So I recently discovered that Pilot friction erasable pens actually work really well with sewing, because when you draw with this pen on the fabric and then you put an iron and steam it, it disappears. So that's fantastic. So now that we have all of our pieces cut out, we are going to start by overlocking. So we have all of the 4 waistband pieces, 2 for the front and 2 for the back. And the only part we need to overlock is this part right here. So overlocking the edge here and here on all pieces. We're also going to at the same time overlocking all of the skirt pieces. So we need to overlock the side seams and the center back seam of the skirt. So the next thing we're gonna do is press the seam allowance 1 centimeter and then stitch in place. So now we're going to start working on the darts. So now that we've sewn our darts, on the front bodice, we're going to press the darts towards the waist, so downwards. And on the back bodice, the neckline dart is going to be pressed towards the center back. And as you can see, now that I've pressed with heat, all of the pink marking is gone. It's like magic. So happy about that. So the next step is to sew all of the shoulder seams. So you have the front bodice here. And we're gonna put the back bodice pieces right sides together on top of the front bodice. And sew the shoulder seams with 1 centimeter seam allowance. And do the same for the lining pieces. So for me that's the white pieces. Now press the seam allowances open on all of the shoulder seams, like that. So now we're gonna place the bodices right sides together. So the outer fabric and the lining fabric on top of each other. And we're gonna pin them in place, matching up the shoulder seams, center back, center front, etc. What we're going to do now is mark the slit at the front. So I have my pattern piece here. There we go. And I'm making size 40, so this is my line. Just gonna put the pin there. I'm also going to mark the center front, exactly where that is. Yes. I have my pink marker again. And I'm making sure the layers are flat. You don't actually have to cut this yet. In the instructions it says to cut here, but today I'm gonna try to sew the stitching first and then cut. Let's see how that goes. So the pink line here is the cut line, so you're gonna cut to this point here, but we're gonna sew with 1 centimeter seam allowance, and here 1 centimeter from the center front we are going down into a V. So we're gonna meet this point, sew 1 stitch across and then going up. That way when we turn it's going to be a sharper point. It sounds like it doesn't gonna be like it's a bit counterintuitive, but trust me, it's the same when sewing like a sharp point on a collar or something, a sharp edge. You want to sew up until here, 1 stitch across and then up again. And for the rest of it, it's just 1 centimeter seam allowance. So you're gonna start at center back, come around here, go down to the point, 1 stitch across, go up here and back. And for the armholes, you just start at armhole depth on one side, sew all of the way to the other side, and that's it. So it's 3 seams. 1, 2, 3. I'm starting here at the center back. Make sure to backstitch so the seam doesn't unravel. So when I'm 1 centimeter from the center front line that we drew, I'm going to keep the needle down, lift the presser foot up, and start sewing towards the point. You can draw this line if you want to make it easier. I'm just beside the point now. I'm going to lift the presser foot up, turn, so that I'm 90 degrees from the pink line. I'm going to hand roll this, I don't know what to call it, 1 stitch that way, lift again and turn, and then we're going to make our way up to here again. And then when we are 1 centimeter from here, we turn again and continue around. And backstitch again when we reach the center back. And it maybe would have been a good idea to draw this line because it's not super precise, but this is gonna work fine. So I'm gonna cut up through the line here. And cut as close to the little stitch there as you dare, not through it. And then we are going to trim a bit of excess. So at the points here, you can just cut off a bit of fabric to reduce the bulk. So when we turn this, it's going to be easier. And where you see curves, you can clip in to the seam allowance. Here I like to reduce some bulk as well, because there are many layers here where the shoulder seams are sewn. So this way it's going to be easier to manage it when we turn it. You can also cut off a bit of the darts here, because that's excess bulk we don't need. And same on this side, just clip into the curves so it will be easier to shape it. And here is also a bit of a curve. Cut as close to the seam line as you can without cutting through it. And this is going to make it easier to shape. And do the same at the armholes. My best tip for this is to use a sharper pair of scissors than these ones. Make sure it's sharp to the point, so that you don't have to cut like this, because then it's really easy to cut through. But you can just snip like this. So now we're gonna press as well as we can. For this step, it's really good to have a point presser. If you don't have one, you can do your best by Okay, so now we are ready to turn it to the right side. So the back pieces are going through the shoulders and out of the front. So I'm just going to take my hand through the shoulder, grab the back bodice piece and pull it through to this side. And I'm going to do the same for this one. So I have my fingers through the shoulder and I'm grabbing the back bodice and pulling it through to the right side. So this is the front. And we have our slit here. And we have the back pieces. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to take a needle. Just make sure everything is sharp and has been pulled through nicely. And then we're going to press all of the seams. And when you're pressing, I like to press from the wrong side, because then I can see that the outer fabric is dominant. So this is how we're going to press it. It's enough to have like 1 millimeter or 2, just a tiny amount. If you press from this side, you don't want the white to be showing. So that's it. We're going to go through and press all of the seams we've made so far. And as I said, I like to do it from this side so that I can see the right side of the fabric, like the outer fabric from this side, because then I know the white is not going to be showing on the outside. If you wanted to do some kind of top stitching, now would be the time. Actually, now that I think about it, you will need to do the side seams and the center back seam before you do the top stitching. Otherwise it's really hard to fold it out like this. So you could do all the way around, like 1 centimeter. You could do just at the edge here to keep everything in place. You could do like 5 centimeters around everything. It's up to you. I'm actually going to leave this as it is, because top stitching and this kind of print I don't think really matches. It would be really nice if you're using like a linen or something in a solid color. I think top stitching would look really nice. But for this one I think it's enough just like this. So now we are going to sew the center back and the side seams of the bodice. So I'm going to show you here on the side seam, right sides together. So the outer pieces and the lining pieces are going to be sewn right sides together. They meet at the armhole point here, put a pin here. So from here and to here. And the same goes for the center back. So just fold these pieces out, lining, they meet at the center back neckline here, and all the way to here. So we're gonna sew with 1 centimeter seam allowance on these 3 seams, side, center back, and the other side. Now we're just going to press the seam allowances open and turn, and then press a bit from the right side as well. One thing I'm actually going to change from the written instructions of the pattern is now I want to baste these layers together, so to treat them as one. So I'm just going to, with like 5mm seam allowance, I'm going to sew all of the way around the waist to keep the layers together. And then we're going to assemble the waistbands. So what we're going to do now is attaching the waistbands to the bodice. So we have an outer piece and an inner piece. This is for the back bodice and this is for the front bodice. The back is a little bit longer, wider than the front, so you can keep them separate. So let's switch to the back then. So the outer fabric is going to be right sides together with the bodice, and the inner fabric is going to be right sides together with the lining. So the bodice is sandwiched between the waistbands. I'm just going to put a temporary pin here to show you. And when you have sewn the seam here, you're going to come like this. And at the sides, you're going to have a hole for the waist ties. And at the side seam here, make sure the edges of the waistband line up perfectly with each other, and continue to pin. That way, when we flip them back, they're not going to be separated with a hole, they're just going to be edge to edge. Same on the inside, just make sure they line up perfectly like that. So we have quite a few layers here. I usually don't pin a lot, but for this step it's quite good to put a few pins. And then when all of them are pinned in place, we're gonna sew with 1 centimeter seam allowance all the way around. At the side seams where all of the edges meet, you can backstitch a bit to make sure it's extra secure. So we have attached the waistbands to the bodice. Now it looks like this. So we are going to press both of them away from the bodice, and then we're going to press the seam allowance on the outer fabric 1 centimeter down, because this is going to be top stitched to the skirt later. So we're going to attach the skirt to the inside piece and then top stitch this part down afterwards. Hope that makes sense. So we already overlocked or zigzagged the sides, the edges. So the front skirt is 1 piece and the back skirts are 2 pieces. So we are going to sew the side seams, right sides together, front and back, center back seam, right sides together, and the other side seam, right sides together. And we're going to attach it to the waistband. This is the front because it doesn't have a center seam. The back has a seam. And we are going to attach the skirt to the inside waistband, not the outside. So, wrong side of the skirt, right side of the waistband. So it's essentially going to be a sandwich, but in 2 steps. So, right side of the waistband to the wrong side of the skirt. And same here, make sure the pieces line up nicely at the side seam, and we're gonna pin all the way around. And now it should look something like this. So it's attached only to the white, the inside, the lining of the waistband. And we're gonna sew with 1 centimeter seam allowance all the way around. And then this part is going to come over and be top stitched on. And that creates this kind of loop inside where we can put the belt. The waistband is attached with the skirt. Here's the top stitching. And at the waist, here we have the loop, the opening for the waist ties, the belt ties. And here at the hem I have pressed 1 centimeter and then 1 centimeter again, so it's a double fold. And I'm just gonna stitch the hemline. Now the dress is complete except for the ties. So we have our 2 very long belt pieces, and I have put 2 pieces together to create this because I didn't have enough fabric. And we are going to sew right sides together, so I just folded it. And we're going to leave about this much as a hole so we can turn it inside out. So I'm just gonna start here and sew, and here at the corner we're just gonna sew and sew, and we're gonna do that for both of the belts. So here at the corner I'm just going to remove some bulk, trim down the seam allowance a bit, just so it's easier to turn and we get a sharp point here. So this is going to be inside of the dress, so it's not going to be showing. If this was going to be visible, I would hand sew this, but now since it's not going to be showing, I'm just going to sew a seam here. Now that the belt is done, go ahead and use a pin or a needle to scoop out the corners and give it a good press. Okay, so here we have our 2 belts. Excuse the noise in the background. It's a lovely day today, and there are a bunch of kids just outside my window, if you're wondering who's screaming. So we're gonna need a big safety pin. So one of them is going through the back and one is going through the front. So I'm just gonna start with one here. So I'm putting a safety pin like this, and I'm gonna pull it through all the way to the other side of the waist. So when you're pulling it out, make sure you have kind of equal amounts on both sides, like that. And then we're gonna pull the belt through on the back as well. And both of the belts are equal in length, so there's no right or wrong with the front and back here. And I'm just gonna pull it through here. So it's going between the 2 waistbands, in the middle of the outer fabric and the white inner fabric. And now we're gonna tie. So the waistband here is going to be a bit scrunched up, but we can adjust it once we try it on. I'm just gonna start like this and see, just tie sort of a loose knot for now, and then we can adjust it once we put it on. And that's the dress finished. I'm gonna put it on and show you. Okay, so this is what it looks like. I'm just going to tighten the belt a bit and tie a knot, make a bow. You can just leave it like that if you prefer, but I like the bows, I think they're cute. I actually love this. It feels so 60s in a really good way, and the color. So that's the finished dress. It's very cute summer cute summer dress. So you can choose how hard you want to scrunch this up, or if you want it to be more loose fitting. What do you think? If you like this dress, you can find it for free. The pattern is available to download. I will put the link in the description box below. If you have watched this far, you might as well subscribe and like this video. And I put out new videos every Monday, so make sure to be here next week. Yeah, and that's it for today. Hope you liked it. And until next time, happy sewing!